Hello, welcome back, or perhaps welcome for the very first time to the Keeping Her Keys podcast. I'm Cindy Brannon. I'm an author, an educator, founder of the Covina Institute, which is a fabulous private online coven. I'm also a psychologist, and I teach and write from the crossroads of modern life and the deeper world centered around the fabulous ancient goddess Hecate and her many companions. In this episode, Kristen, who is the producer and editor of the pod, another priestess of Hecate, and I have a conversation about some of our favorite topics: goddesses, mysticism, and deeper world experiences, whether it's dreams or being in flow with the goddess, uncanny experiences, sacred crafting, even making meals for Hecate that are inspired by practices that are thousands of years old. We get into all of that within the context of how wild and free the goddesses are in our experience. This is the last episode of this season of the pod. We'll be back in September with new episodes. We've got Circe and Medea and much more coming up in the fall. I want to thank everyone who's been with the pod so far, which has really evolved in the last few months. We've upped our podcasting technology quite a bit. It's been a fun experience. I have a lot of Gemini in my chart, so learning new technology and new communication is always a welcome challenge for me. I am evolving, the pod is evolving, and I bet you are evolving too, because at Hecate's Crossroads, we are always in that spinning wheel that is a flame, that is a key, and we change and grow as we follow Hecate's torches deeper into her mysteries. While we're on summer break from the pod, you can hang out with us in the brand new completely free space in Covina, which is the coven I founded 5 years ago. It's called the Crossroads. You'll be able to join in the live streams, and there's a great library of recordings and much more that Kristen is curating. So come and join us there, or you can watch when we stream live on YouTube, and you'll also be able to catch the recordings there. So the 2 live streams we're doing are coming up near the end of July and the end of August. You can get all the details by going to keepingherkeys.com. This past season has been so wonderful. We've had deep conversations, emotional at times, lighthearted at others, as we journey through this path of Hecate and witchcraft together. I want to thank everybody who listens, who sends me emails. I love it when y'all send me emails. And all of those who work behind the scenes, like Kristen and Leah, everyone who's on camera. Kristen frequently, of course, is on camera too. Everyone who's been on the pod in this past year. Having the pod and being the high priestess of a coven is such a privilege that I have. And I value everyone who is part of the Keeping Her Keys world. I hope you enjoy this episode. Don't forget to head on over to keepingherkeys.com to choose which way it's better for you to join us for those live streams that we've got coming up. And if you are looking for a deeper coven experience, we have the Gate of Release starting in just a few weeks, just after the first live stream. This is such a powerful journey. So in the coven, The foundational program is known as Hecate's Keys, and it consists of 4 seasonal courses. The one that's coming up that starts at the end of July, around the cross quarter between the summer solstice and the autumn equinox, or Lunasa or Lammas, is known as the Gate of Release. This culminates in the Animarum catharsis. We connect with Persephone, Hecate, Demeter as we journey into Hecate's cave. I'm looking at some of the witchcrafting we've got scheduled. We'll be making votive holders, masks, pendulums with pouches, cauldrons. We've got a great lineup of crafting and personal explorations. Of course, we're looking at boundaries. We're looking at establishing our own council of spirits, and lots around Samhain time as well. Nishida will be there teaching a movement class. We've got the fabulous Moon Days classes every Monday morning. Come on, witches, get out of bed and join me bright and early on Moon Days. And we go through the moon and the signs for that coming week and focus on what I call moon tensions and do a lot around that. And Leah and Julia and Nicole help out with that. We've got so much coming up. So, summer break from the pod, but lots going on. Head on over to keepingyourkeys.com to discover everything that is coming up. And as always, hail Hecate and stay in your magic. Hello and welcome to the mystical. Kristen and I are going to be exploring that crossroads of being closely aligned with goddesses, practicing a witchcraft that is healing and empowering, and mysticism, which I'm going to really broadly and loosely define as connecting to goddesses and other spirits in the deeper world for guidance and a better understanding of the mysteries of life. A nice broad definition of mysticism for today. So let's begin by lighting our candles. So we'll begin with our counterclockwise, what we're releasing or cleansing ourselves from. And let's cast the circle around our goddesses, our wild and free goddesses, and all of the mystical that they can open up for us. I've selected this poem I wrote quite a few years ago called My Goddesses Are Wild and Free, to help us connect to their wild and free mysteries and their more mystical aspects. And I think when I read the poem, it'll get cleared up why, to me, this poem is an unlocker of the mystical. You say you put your goddess on a shelf, claim she comes to you upon command. I don't understand. My goddesses are wild and free, inconvenient, independent. I don't think we know the same ones. Hunting the wicked, conquering monsters, turning fools into swine, riding off in a blaze of glory, shining pale moonbeams, burning torches. My goddesses are wild and free. Do they scare you? They don't care much for the religions of man, nor for his power plays, enduring, changing, fleeing, remaining. My goddesses are wild and free. Don't look for them on your altar. They aren't there. Death walkers, truth talkers, troublemakers, impatient with fakers, claiming those they desire, casting the rest into their fire. My goddesses are wild and free, ignoring my calls, showing up uninvited, forever traveling that wheel of theirs, leaving behind a trail that I must follow. My goddesses are wild and free. That poem means so much to me. Many things I've written have a deep meaning for me that is never kind of conveyed outside of me. It would take me days to explain what that poem means to me. But what I was stretching for was the mystical in that poem. Although the altars are ways that connect me to my goddesses, they're not traps for my goddesses.
Right.
I am just as likely to find Hecate, Artemis, Circe, and the others when I am out in the yard, when I'm in the shower, when I'm driving down a road. Like, I am as likely to encounter them and be deeply connected to their mysteries in any of those places as I am standing here. Although this is helpful, and I think the existence of having like a dedicated sacred space does help us kind of attune to the deeper essence of our goddesses. And at the same time, it's not obligatory. So to me, this is very, very different from saying I have to have this certain type of shrine and I have to do these very certain things. And that is the only way I can ever experience what is greater or deeper than me. I think those are two very different things.
Yeah. Just about breaking free of conformity, right? Like you can't, when you're really deeply connected to, you know, the sacred or the deeper world, like that's not something that you can put in a box.
You
That's not
can't.
something
It's wild and free.
you can pigeonhole. You know, like you said, even though it's great to connect, I think that connecting to the mystical is about having reverence for these deeper connections in just in your existence. You know what? Does that make sense?
I think
Like,
reverence
just,
is definitely a key word here.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I have reverence, so much reverence for goddesses, for the sacred feminine. I have so much reverence. Like I just absolutely have respect and dedication, to Hecate, to Artemis, Persephone, Demeter, even the Kaliak, that I just have, like, I have so much reverence. And I don't know how I think reverence is not something that you can train another person to have.
I agree.
Sometimes it's good to draw like a comparison so we can say, this is what we're talking about compared to maybe this mindset over here. So the mindset would be the goddesses, like that there are specific rules about the goddesses and that you must do specific things and that she will grant you specific favors. So it's almost like the mystical juice gets sucked out for me when
Yeah,
I go too deep into that. That to me, like the mystical comes not from expecting my goddesses to be performing monkeys, like that it's a trail I follow. It's not me doing these things and then she is going to do this stuff for me. Like it's not that. It's
right.
about a journey, about on like that is the mystical, like this seeking of more being myself by going deeper into what is beyond the mundane.
Yeah. It's a deeper connection, and you can't be fully present without when you're like checking boxes
Right?
and
There's no checklist
those
here.
rules.
Um, and at the same time, I know, like, I'm thinking back decades ago when I first got started with goddesses. I know what it's like to want to get it right
Yeah.
because if someone is learning to kind of open up to the mystical world of these goddesses, it's natural to think, well, what if something else gets through that's not beautiful and helpful? That if I open up to all of this, that is this unseen world, could I possibly be harmed by some spirit in that deeper world? I would say it also looped back to reverence and respect, and that you get out what you get back what you put out. I mean, there's practices that you can do. This isn't to say that we should just be like completely irresponsible with our spiritual practice. I do think there are practices that we do that facilitate our own attunement and our right-mindedness, that these experiences of the mystical will be empowering and healing and not destructive.
In a way, I feel like it's much less likely to be destructive if you are kind of attuned and open and present, as opposed to like distracting yourself by like trying to do things like a very specific way or follow a very specific guideline.
Yeah, I agree with that too, that if there's like if there's a lot of rigidity,
Yeah.
there's something about rigidity, fixed mindset, this whole I must do things this way because if I don't, bad things will happen. It's like, well, it's almost like that idea that, if you're too much in the fear zone of like, if you think these things will happen, it's almost that you can manifest them towards you. My experience of the goddesses, although they can be unsettling and kind of scare the life into me, that they're not out to harm me. And we were all talking earlier today, and someone said, when they get a hold of you, they really get a hold of you. It's like a goddess comes to us, whether it's Hecate calling us, or even Persephone, or Artemis, like Haliak, the Morrigan, they shake us up. And there's almost that moment where it's like, this can't be real.
I'm trying to think of a good example. It definitely happened like during sort of my awakening to Hecate. I had lots of moments like that. I don't know why. Like I'm just gonna keep talking about it. With like what's pinging for me right now is you talk about opening to like the deeper world and like sitting with a flame. And I remember like this one instance, like I was doing this and I was sitting with this candle, and all of a sudden it's like it felt electric. Like it felt electric and I could feel it in my body and I could feel it around me, and like I felt so connected, and I was like, what is happening to me right now? Like am I losing my marbles? Like what is getting it? Just like it really shook me up. And I think that it is an awakening. It can be alarming, but ultimately like very powerful. I think back to rigidity and flow, like it's just about opening up and like just being open, just being open, just be open and willing to uh kind of just allow what needs to come through to come through. Don't get too caught up in yourself, or too in your head about it.
Something that I used to really struggle with, like back in the prehistoric days in my 20s and early 30s, this was the question, is this real?
Yeah.
Did that ever happen to you?
Yeah. Yeah, it did. I think you were the first person that said something to me like, well, did it feel real? Did it feel real to you? Was it real to you? You know, yeah,
Define real.
yeah,
We live in a world where we are constantly bombarded by things we know to be fake. And when we see something that's fake, even if it looks real, we say, oh, that's fake. You can tell that's fake. So why, when we have these mystical experiences, instead of saying, oh yeah, this is real, it feels real, do we say, could just be my imagination, could be that I maybe imbibed a little bit too much sacred smoke, I don't know, my microdose of the mushrooms was maybe not so micro, too much mugwort, whatever it is, that there's some kind of psychedelic or psychotropic um instigator of the experience. Like I wasted so much time with the is this real question. And one day, after a particularly long period of analyzing the realness of the goddesses that came to me and so on, in dreams and rituals and spontaneous experiences, and just things inside of me that I knew to be true, that if is this imaginary, am I bonkers,
mhm,
or is this just like a legitimate experience of something mystical? After a long, like weeks and weeks of doing this, I was like sitting outside and I just decided that is it. From here on out, it is real. It is real to me, and that is all that matters. It feels real, it feels right. These mystical experiences, goddesses come to me and speak to me. It is not a psychiatric diagnosis. I'm fine. I don't meet any of the criteria for a psychiatric diagnosis. How you get diagnosed with something, it needs to have a significant impact on your ability to go about living a regular life.
Yeah.
Like you and I both excel at regular life. You know what I mean? Like we work, we take care of our homes, we take care of our loved ones, pets, land. We do all the regular life things. And I would link back, being a psychologist, I would link back to the distinction is, does this person feel distressed by this? And are they capable of going about a regular life? Like broadly defined, like can they dress themselves and feed themselves? Do they pay their bills? Like, do they do all of these things? Are they harming anyone? Like, my goddesses have never said to do anything that would harm me or anybody. So it's complicated to enter the mystical because there are potential implications that we might be judged as woo woo, not my favorite expression. If we go around saying, I had this dream, Hecate spoke to me, I quit my career, I moved to the country, I started writing about Hecate, and here we all are 7 years later. I mean, for me as a public figure, that story's kind of out and about. But, people do some people will say that's kind of wacky.
I found when that happened to me, and I sort of saw people in my life like peacing out. We kind of quit talking and they drifted off. But it's like a filter in a way for me, you know.
Yeah,
I
that's so
mean,
true, right?
yeah, sort of like coming into alignment is coming into alignment. Like you're gonna shed, relationships and that aren't particularly helpful or supportive. And I mean, it's not fun, like it's hard, but I think it's part of the process.
It is part of the process that there is like a lot of baggage needs to be shed. And
Yeah.
that can be relationships. And I agree with you. Like I've lost multiple relationships along the years and some of them like I still miss those people, but at the same time my life is much richer and more meaningful than it ever has been before. Like every day I feel like my life gets better. Even when life is really hard and kind of shitty,
Mhm.
there is like I have a center. I have a foundation upon which I stand. And that to me includes this mystical aspect. And it is okay to live a life that other people don't understand.
I'm gonna say it again.
It is okay to live a life that other people don't understand. Maybe we don't have the freedom to just walk down the street waving a sign saying, Hecate speaks to me in dreams and otherwise, and I hereby proclaim it as the truth, the way. This is the only way. Because I don't think that's mystical at all. Like, I don't think any of these religious fundamentalists, and they exist in all religions. Like you'll find them in pagan religions, you'll find them in the New Age, you'll find them everywhere. And a lot of times, the mystical aspects of these huge religions actually like lives on the margins of the religion because
Yeah.
the mainstream of the religion is not about transcendence or connecting and receiving guidance and so on from your deities. It's about like conformity and control of the masses
Yeah.
and dogma, and also selling the idea that if you do a bunch of very specific things you will be rewarded in the afterlife. That's not mystical. And what I was trying to stretch for by this wild and free goddesses is I want to stretch into the mystical. I want these dreams. I want to be driving down a road and I see something on the side of the road. And all of a sudden, it is like I get this thrum and sensation that I am connected to something so much greater and deeper and gain a little insight into my place in all of that and what it perhaps even means. but it's not about also having all the answers. This is definitely a pet peeve of mine. When you're like reading a book and someone is like, it takes 13 days and 7 hours to reincarnate. I'm like,
Right.
you've just taken the mystical out of something that is inherently mystical and not meant to be perceived by the living. I know sometimes, you get channeled information, or people claim to have channeled information that can be really specific like that. But for me, as someone who is in communication with who I consider to be like an ancestor, and that person can speak through me at times if I so choose, like it's very different than these things that have to be really specific, that it's much more about life advice
Mhm.
than you must do these things a certain way. Sometimes, but like not on the micro plane, like it's a bigger kind of thing. I don't know if that makes any sense. Maybe it does take 13 weeks to be reincarnated. I don't know.
Right. Well, that's back to rigidity and like boxing things in. I mean, anybody that's telling you that something needs to be a specific way, I mean, I think just maybe walk away from that, you know, um, and learn to trust yourself and your truth.
Right. I think that's the most thing. It's if it doesn't feel real and true to you
Yeah.
regarding the mystical, like stay away from it. If it, like the goddesses can be unsettling and rattle us around, uncage us and so on, but it always feels right to me.
Yeah. Even when it shakes you up, like even when it's not ideal, it's usually right.
I don't drink a lot of alcohol. I don't even eat a lot of sugar. Like I generally function these days to keep myself at a state of equanimity because I feel I don't need anything. Like in the past, I've done different things like ayahuasca and psilocybin, like different things, like other things you smoke and so on. But I just don't really feel I need that anymore. I will couch that with the fact that I often am burning sacred smoke. So obviously, there are impacts of inhaling things like frankincense and mugwort and so on a regular basis. Perhaps I am so mystical and dialed in because I'm always slightly stoned, which I'm fine with. I do think these things have a place because I think we can be so conditioned and locked up that I know um like psychedelics are really having a moment right now in terms of their therapeutic applications for things like PTSD and chronic pain. And I hope that the people that use them that way are allowing the mystical aspects to come through too.
I think that some of these things can be an opener. I've also done many of these things, which I don't do anymore. And I also, feel better and more connected for it. They could be an opener, but I think it's no different than what you were saying about having to say your altar a specific way. I think that these spirits that you're connecting to, you know, psychedelics, whatever, like can be just as rigid. Like do you know what I'm
Yeah.
saying? Like it can, you can't count on anything really but yourself and your connection to lead you into the mystical. Otherwise, you're just following someone else's directions. You're following, like you're following these psychedelics, like you're just following a path that's not your own.
I'm thinking about like the use of ayahuasca, which of course, comes from a different culture and so on, and the ceremonies around that. And like that, this is I know a lot of middle-aged white guys who go off and do ayahuasca because they're just kind of fed up with their lives, which there's nothing wrong with that, but that's very different than I want to understand myself and the world better. So I'm going to use these psychedelics as a potential key to help me do that.
Yeah. I think a key is a good way to describe it. Like open, but don't let it, lead your way completely.
Right, because you can become addicted or think that that's the only way that you can do these things. And I think that's also like the lure of the mystical is that we don't like we kind of relinquish everyday life and become like a Tibetan monk or something. But even Tibetan monks, they have their whole like kind of community structure is that they stay very connected to the everyday. They don't even like they go and get food from people. They don't, you know what I mean? Like they're always doing things that kind of keep them linked to the everyday. So even though they live a monastic life, like free from a lot of the accoutrements of a typical lifestyle, they're still like, they go out and get food and they do chores, and there's all these things that keep them in like the body that they have. Because I think when we're encouraging mystical experiences within ourselves, that there is a lot of appeal. Like life can be really hard, and so there's the appeal that we spend too much time in the mystical and don't remain on equal footing with the everyday. And I get that. Like sometimes it's like I don't want to come back. Like this journey, this meditative journey, this place I am in that is so much deeper and greater than regular old me. Yeah, I'd love to stay here.
You have to find that equanimity.
And I do think like building a dedicated spiritual practice into the day, like whatever that may be for someone, where if there is that space, like you said about softening into the candle and just having those experiences. And for me, it also have these experiences in different ways. But for me, if I had to choose, it's hard for me to choose because nature, the ocean, night, the moon, all of these things to me are so mystical. And equally, there is something about when I get my hands dirty, whether like, so we could talk about gardening. What I'm really thinking about is getting my hands dirty with sacred creativity, witchcrafting, whatever you want to call it. There's not even a good term for this. Art therapy to some people, but when my hands are dirty, like they're covered in paint or something, or when we did that whole project, when we made all the ancient components of Hecate's suppers, and I'm like up to my elbows in boiling goat's milk, and doing all these things, or even like with actual blood, because I'm mostly plant-based. I think part of when we were doing that, I said to you, I'm going to cook like actual meat, like on bones and
Yeah,
stuff.
you did.
I did, right? So I can like see bones and blood and whatnot. Like there's something about that, even though like at times it kind of grosses me out using menstrual blood. They're saving it or like wiping it all over your own body in a sacred way. Like all of these like messy, super creative things, or covering myself in mud, which I really love to do and I need to do this summer. Like this is to me, it's like this is the thing that I like crave. But it can also be as simple as like when I'm making a talisman and I'm painting and I've got my plants and I'm like mixing up some kind of like mixture, magical mixture. I don't know. Like you have just had a really profound experience like this, and I want you to talk about that.
The rose beads.
The rose beads.
Okay. So I don't, this is something that came over me. And like I have this very deep connection to roses, which I associate sort of, I don't know, like if I had to pick a botanical that I associate most with Hecate, it would probably be roses. And they're just so enchanting, like, and they're so evocative of the divine feminine and the life cycle, from like hips, representative of the womb, to like the thorns, to the blooming and and like all this. So I had this really special connection to roses. And I recently saw someone make rose petal clay. They ground clay with like a mortar and pestle and like rolled it into beads. And I had no idea until I started researching the history of this. Like, this is why rosaries are called rosaries. Like, rosaries were initially made with rose petals, but like it predates that. Like, it goes even further back, like centuries, like 1,000 years, 2,000 years. Like, prayer beads made from flowers is a thing. And it's just really, so I started doing it. It's
It's
Me
so
too.
beautiful.
And I'm just so enchanted by the whole process. And like each one of these beads was, you know, like a trip to the crossroads or like a rose that I found, or like each one is connected to like a special moment or something sacred. And I have 8 on here right now, and I'm just gonna let it grow. I don't, it's just such a beautiful way to connect. And there's something there, like I've been really, this is part of the opening up. I've had this thing with this epithet. What is it? Syndactylus, or like rosy finger. And I think most commonly Homer said it in the Odyssey, like Dawn's rosy fingers. And there's something there. Like once I got my hands in these squished up rose petals and just, you know, like I was squeezing the juice out of them and like, you know, rolling them and like creating this beautiful talisman with this thing that I'm so connected to. I don't know. It's just, it's really working on me very, very deeply. And knowing that it's connected to like something ancient and like there's this lineage and it's like it's greater than me. And it's just, I feel very in flow with something deeper.
Rhododactylos. Rhodo means rose, dactylos, hands. And like
Mm-hmm.
you said, from Homer, the rosy hands of the dawn. And then
Yeah.
this whole lineage and how making those rose petal beads, like how much that's unlocking for you that
Yeah.
can't kind of be unlocked in a prepackaged experience.
Yeah. You got to get in it. That, I think that's part of the thing. You got to get in it. You got to get your hands dirty. You got to get all the way in there and like fully experience it sometimes to understand, you
Which
know,
can
or to
be
just to
risk,
open up.
right? And I think this links to the whole, is this real? Because it's this kind of conditioning we have.
Coming back around to what you were saying about like just sort of like finding that equanimity and finding that balance, I think that as you open yourself up to the mystical, like it does, like they sort of collide, you know, like when you are in alignment, I think that that gap is bridged, like, you know, and it's not something that you're like seeking out, like it's just something that's part of your life or like part of your being, part of your experience. And I think that that's another reason why I love this, because like I kind of use it, I keep it in my pocket and it's like a little fidget and I have it with me pretty much everywhere I go now, while I'm doing the practical mundane things, but it sort of like keeps me connected, you know.
Yeah, that's such a good point because something about being more attached to the mystical, even if it is like a mundane experience, if we have like that little talisman that kind of anchors us, like it's a real key, it anchors us to what's deeper and more true and our guides and so on, that even in those mundane interactions, we can receive like guidance. You know, we might call it intuition, but it's like, oh no, I shouldn't trust that person, or I should totally do this thing. You know what? Like those kind of situations, we just become more aligned to it. Consequentially, although the mystical might not be directly concerned about really like mundane things like money and home, I do think there's a real tangible benefit when we are more open to the goddess's advice and the dreams and so on, that it brings us into this right alignment where navigating all of life's problems becomes easier. I have reverence and respect, and I value the mystical, and it helps me to also want to be a better dedicant of these goddesses in every aspect of my life. So if I have a problem, I want the best resources. It can be from science or good financial advice. Like I want all of these things to help me make the best decision because I have so much value for Hecate and the goddesses and all of the mystical aspects. It's not that I'm relying on the mystical to solve my problems for me, um, but that they're like they're my guides. But I'm not one for sitting on the couch like waiting for money to fall from the sky. You know, for me, it's okay. Goddesses, there's this big problem. Maybe I'll use my cards, or maybe I'll just do like a direct communication. I really like writing letters to the
Yeah.
goddess, and give me some, if you've got some time to spare, I would like some advice.
I'm glad you said writing letters, and that's something I wanted to say earlier about sort of bridging that gap between the mystical and the mundane is document. That's something I do. Sometimes things come through and, like really, especially like with dreams and stuff, when I'm dream journaling, I'll go back at the end of the day and I'll be like, what did I even write? And I'll like the dots. And I think that is a form of reverence also, is like honoring this enough to like document your experiences.
Right. Like you take it seriously. And then when the goddesses speak or they write back. So we've
Yeah.
got this exercise, which is called the Voces or Vocas or Vox Dea, which just means voice of the goddess. So we write letters to our chosen goddess about whatever we want. And then either we partner up with someone or we allow the goddess to speak through our own selves and write back to us. This is a mystical experience. Like to write a letter to the goddess is to enter the mystical because, it is like I am creating this thing, this document that connects me to my goddess of my, the goddess of my choosing, and then trusting that she will reply. I know this can be intimidating to people for so many reasons. Like we've been doing this for what, like at least 5 years now.
Yeah.
So we've had so many beautiful experiences that people have shared. And then equally, there is this factor where people find this very intimidating. So if you are on the side that this seems intimidating to write to the goddess and then she writes back through me, or I partner up with someone and the goddess writes back through them to me, like we hear you, we understand that it's intimidating. And you can totally do this. Like nothing bad will happen, because there is a lot of hoopla out there that if you allow the goddess to kind of speak through you, like channeling and so on, sometimes called aspecting, that, this can really have consequences if you're not well prepared, um, that you can lose yourself in all of this. And, we talked about that earlier, like there's that aspect of going too deep into the mystical. In this exercise, though, to write a letter to the goddess and to ask her to reply to you, it's a very specific sort of mystical experience. It's not really much different than if you read the cards, like the cards are communicating with you.
Yeah.
And often through you. And if you've ever read cards for someone else, it's the same kind of thing, that you become this conduit for the spirits that are represented by the cards. And so the letting the goddess use your hands, whether you're the partner or you're writing in a reply to yourself, you will not lose yourself in this process. But it is about saying, like, trusting what comes out of your hands.
Something that you taught me to do in the beginning when we started to do this was like, I think you said set a timer for like 10 minutes and just whatever comes out, let it come out. Just let it come out. Just trust it to come out. Don't get
And
in
I
your
think,
own way.
yeah, and that's how you write to the goddess. And then I would say, even do the same thing with the reply, is say, this is just complete, intuitive, attuned writing that I'm not going to edit. Whatever comes through is what comes through, and I'm going to trust that it's real and meaningful, either for myself or my partner. It is like, it's a very brave exercise to do. And I think that to go into the mystical, to deepen your relationship with these goddesses, like it takes a lot of courage. And it is so deeply, deeply, deeply rewarding. No, I wouldn't, there's very little about my life I would change. And this certainly, if someone said, Cindy, I will give you $10 million to give up this mystical life of yours, I'd be like, no, thank you.
No way. No way.
It's so rich. Like it makes me rich.
I can't imagine not living this life.
No,
Not that
me
I'm in it.
either. I've tried to do it like in the distant past. It wasn't good. And I want to spend the rest of my life like living this way. And it's my choice. It's not that I feel like I need these goddesses to survive. It's that, no, this is wonderful. I love it. It brings value and meaning to my life every day in every way. And I wouldn't trade it for a thing. Our goddesses are wild and free, and we are mystical creatures pursuing her mysteries. Thanks so much for hanging out with us. May you unlock much in the mystical.